Welcome back to another episode of the Junkyard Pod. I'm your host, Tony Pesta, alongside Jackson Flickinger, and today we are joined by Corey Walsh to talk about some off-season troubles for the Cavs. It's been a while since we recorded a pod. I think we needed some time to collect our thoughts and put some space between us and that disastrous postseason debut for the Cavs, but now that it is officially the offseason, the ESPN trade machines have already been fired up. Fans haven't been able to wait. I'm seeing new Jarrett Allen and Donovan Mitchell trades every day on Twitter. So I feel like it's only right that we share our thoughts and vent a little here on two topics that I feel me and Jackson might actually disagree on. We have mostly agreed on everything so far on this pod, but I think today we might get split on a couple of the topics. We're going to discuss both Jarrett Allen and Donovan Mitchell's future with the team. Should Allen be traded? What is his value? Is Mitchell committed long-term? And where would that leave the Cavaliers if Mitchell forced his way out of Cleveland? There's a lot of fun stuff to get to today, but I want to start by getting your initial thoughts, Jackson. How concerned are you about Mitchell's player option in 2025?
I'm very concerned just because the Cavs basically have 2 years since they traded for him to convince him that Cleveland is his home because, he has this year, he has this upcoming year, and then the following year are guaranteed. And then after that, he has this player option. If you get the sense that he isn't committed long-term, you will have to trade him probably prior to next season. So this is really this upcoming year is going to be a make or break year for that. This regular season felt like a dream season for Donovan Mitchell and the Cavs. The regular season, it was Mitchell's best regular season. He should have been first team All-NBA. He scored 71 points in a game. Really just put it all together in a way that he hasn't in Utah. But then when you flame out as bad as the Cavs did in the first round, you can't really count that as a win for somebody who really has a desire to make conference finals and NBA finals. And really, as one of the as a borderline top 10 player in the league, that's fair for him to want to do those things. So, he didn't choose to come to Cleveland. He has no, I don't think he dislikes Cleveland or anything like that, but it's just, he has no ties to Cleveland. There's nothing really holding him here. So it's just, this upcoming year is going to be huge. And the Cavs really only have one offseason to put pieces around him that makes sense with this core. So that's what they're gonna have to do. And if there's another first round exit like there was this year, he's like the Donovan Mitchell experience is probably over before it really even gets off the ground.
Yeah. I will push back and say there is a picture of Donovan Mitchell wearing a Cleveland LeBron jersey when he's 5 years old. So that's a very strong tie to Cleveland, of course.
And
obviously, he always planned on being here.
There's also a video of him celebrating, LeBron saying he's taking his talents to South Beach. So maybe that's where his real ties are.
He had some growing up to do is all I'm saying. But it was a dream regular season and kind of a nightmare playoffs for Mitchell. I want to flip this to Corey. Are you growing worried about Mitchell's looming free agency?
I think in terms of when you make as big of a gamble for a superstar as the Cavs did for Donovan Mitchell, you put all your chips in. You would like there to be more of a guarantee they'd stick around, probably more years on a contract. But every player I feel like at the could wake up on a given day and say they want out, and no one would really be surprised anymore. And I think it's fair for Donovan Mitchell if the season looks to be a repeat of last season where the Cavs just don't really show up when the lights are their brightest. I mean, Donovan, to be honest, had a pretty below average series for his expectations, to put it kindly, towards Donovan. It wasn't like it was Donovan performing the same way he did all year and the team letting him down in the same exact way. It was everyone was flat. There was no Cavalier, I feel like, that you could give a passing grade to for that Knicks series. So I would hope that the front office recognizes that this probably is a very fragile situation, as it should be with any star player, and you're trying to always attract them to want to stay. And you would hope Kobe kind of just looks at the market. He's not someone to be shy about making moves in the offseason. So hopefully he can construct something that will want Donovan to stay long term. But I don't think Donovan can go many places where the young core is as promising as what Cleveland could offer either.
I think the concern is, like, yes, this group is very talented and promising, but how well do they fit around Donovan Mitchell? The Jazz really built everything around Mitchell. It was like, we have Gobert, and then we're building everything else around Mitchell. We're going to get shooters. We're going to get guys who can space the floor. We're going to get secondary ball handlers. And the Cavs, they haven't done that, which, they traded for Mitchell in September, so it's not like they've had an offseason to do it. But, it sounds like there were deals to be made out there at the deadline. At least Chris Fedor has kind of floated that about recently. So it's like, he has to, the team really needs to put him in a position to be like, hey, we know what you need and we can do that for you. And one of my concerns is, it's like Garland and Mitchell, they meshed pretty well from the start, but it felt like there wasn't a whole lot of growth throughout the season. It was like the first preseason game against like the Sixers that I believe they both played in, it was like, oh wow, like this group can be really fun. They have just a good natural chemistry. And it just felt like that natural chemistry was never really tapped into this fullest potential. So, and you saw that really in the series against the Knicks, where it was like, if one of them had the ball, the other one was just spacing completely out and like not really a threat to the defense in any way. So it's like there's just a lot of work to be done that if I was in Mitchell's position, to make me think that, hey, like this is the best spot for me to become the best version of myself and to win.
I think it's kind of hard with superstars to try to it's like going to be hard I feel like the honest answer that Donovan Mitchell needs to be told of why he should stay in Cleveland is because you don't need to be the best player on the Cavs for them to be a championship caliber team in the coming years. Because yes, Utah was completely built around Donovan Mitchell, but we kind of saw what the limitation of that team could be. Because like you were saying, that team was like a Houston Harden-esque built team. Like you were reaching the heights of what that roster could do. So maybe Donovan could take a step back and be like, I know I'm a great player, but maybe I don't necessarily need to be the best player in order for us to win. And the Cavs promise that, or can offer that possibly with a Mobley ascension in the coming years if he sticks around. Like Mobley isn't Gobert, where he just is going to be relegated to watching Donovan put on a show, and then he'll just catch a lob every once in a while and be a dominant defensive force like Gobert was. Like there's a lot of different ways the team can build around Mitchell without making him be like all the lights on him all the time, which would probably, I don't know how Donovan is as a person overall, but I would assume he loves basketball to the point where he would be fine, where he doesn't need to be just patted on the back every 2 seconds, being like, you are our best player. We're going to build around you all the time.
Yeah. And it's like, that's kind of where it comes. That's where the Allen situation comes in. And I don't want to get there too early, but it's like Evan Mobley's still, he has so much room to grow offensively, but he still needs to do it. And like, I think we're all just getting ahead of ourselves. Maybe not you guys in particular, but just the general, like the talk around the Cavs and some of like the quotes that you're seeing. It's like, we all believe in Evan Mobley, but like Donovan Mitchell's freaking good. Like the bar for Evan Mobley to be like the best player on the team is like so high, because like Mitchell's one of the most gifted scorers in the entire league, and I think we're underselling how much Mitchell can improve. I think a lot of the Cavs problems could be mitigated if Mitchell just was a better facilitator, if he was somebody who could kind of like, we've seen Devin Booker grow throughout the Suns playoff runs, whereas like it seemed like before Chris Paul got there, it was like Booker wasn't somebody who could make anything but the simple reads, and now you see him in this year's playoffs. He was just beating teams with his ability to understand the game and see the floor. And it's like there's Mitchell still doesn't do that. You see flashes of it. He can make the simple passes, especially when the floor is spaced out, but there's so much more room for him to grow. So it's like, that's where I think that really, if you want this team to reach its ceiling, you got to make life as easy as possible for Mitchell and also put him in a position where he can grow in those areas while also allowing Mobley to just, come along on his own pace, because we've seen he's so good. Like, Mobley's so good, but bigs take so long to develop. Mobley's an outlier, but that doesn't mean that, hey, by his fourth season, he's going to be like an all NBA player and a great offensive player. Like, we really just, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves.
I agree. Those are all great points. I do think entering the season, maybe we got a little too ahead of ourselves with Evan Mobley in terms of the offensive leap we were expecting. Because the reality is, I think he improved on offense, but because our expectations were so high, a lot of people felt disappointed. But that's another topic. Just to kind of bring this back to Donovan Mitchell, I do think it's important to remember that they acquired Mitchell, like, I think 9 months ago. It hasn't even been a full year. It was after they already had, like, they would have had an opportunity in the summer to retool the supporting cast, all that. Like, it happened very late in the offseason. So this will be Kobe's first opportunity to actually build around Mitchell. Obviously, his options are limited, but this will be his first chance to do it. And I also think part of that includes Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, just internal growth and learning how to play next to Mitchell, as you mentioned. And other people have said this too. I won't pretend like I'm the first person to say this, but with Garland and Mitchell, it kind of felt like it was your turn, my turn. And as much as they meshed together, they didn't really play off each other all that well. And I think at least some of that could be fixed, not only just by playing together longer, but when you look at the Cavs roster, they're really missing a glue guy on the wing. They don't have a guy who's really connecting everyone there. And so whether that be, again, internal growth from someone like Okoro, Dean Wade, whoever it may be, or just adding someone that could play a role in helping Mitchell and Garland mesh a little more, that could free up Evan Mobley to do more things offensively. Exactly how you get to that point by adding new personnel, I'm not sure. We'll talk about that when we get to the Jarrett Allen stuff. But to give my thoughts a little bit on Mitchell's commitment long term, I think, the fact that he has friends outside of Cleveland is horrifying, right? Like him golfing with Allen Houston, a longtime friend who happens to be a member of the New York Knicks front office with their G League team. Like, clearly that's just, doomsday is upon us, right? But jokes aside, I do think there are valid reasons to be concerned about Donovan Mitchell's long-term commitment outside of kind of the Twitter sports radio hysteria. I think the biggest thing is just, Jackson brought it up, this will be his first opportunity to really choose his team. Like, he did have an opportunity when he was in Utah, but that was his first deal. He got a max extension. Utah was in a position for long-term success. They had built around him. It like makes total sense that he would have jumped on that first deal. Now it's like, well, he didn't choose Cleveland. So if he doesn't feel like this is the best spot for him, it would be fair for him to leave. He doesn't have ties. It wouldn't be like LeBron leaving and betraying the city or whatever. It would make perfect sense for Mitchell to explore his options in free agency. But I do think it comes down to the Cavs having trust in themselves. Like, in terms of Kobe needs to trust that he can build around Donovan Mitchell and give him a team that will make him want to stay. I don't know Mitchell personally, but he doesn't strike me as like Kyrie or James Harden, where they're just going to jump ship for no good reason. I do think Mitchell is going to make the best basketball decision for himself. I think he wants to win. I also think he cares about money, which the Cavs will be able to offer him more money than the other teams. So there are aspects of this that I think give Cleveland a little bit more of an advantage than maybe they've been given by the general NBA media, where it sounds like Mitchell's just going to New York no matter what. He doesn't strike me as the guy who, like, if New York is in a bad position 2 years from now, he's going to go there anyways just to be in his hometown. I don't think that pool is as strong as people think it is, but I do think it's on Cleveland and Kobe Altman to build around him. Again, just to kind of bring everything back to my point, I think that includes finding new players, retooling the supporting cast, but also internal growth. If Evan Mobley becomes who he's supposed to be in 2 years, which is a big ask, but if it happens, I find it hard to think that Donovan Mitchell would feel comfortable leaving the situation, because it is such a good spot for him. But I don't know. Like I said, there are valid reasons for why he could leave, and I'm kind of 50-50 on my concern level right now.
I also feel like there's a possibility that there could be Mitchell extends with the Cavs, and then a year later he just gets traded if he's like, I've had enough with this. Like the Paul George OKC deal where everyone was throwing parades in Oklahoma City because like, oh my God, we convinced Paul George to stay. And then a year later he's like, yeah, about that. Thanks for the money. I'd rather just leave. Kawhi wants to go play with me. I mean, you can never feel comfortable, I feel like, as a GM in the NBA, knowing just because you have a player's name on a sheet of paper for a certain amount of time, it doesn't mean they're necessarily going to stay with you forever. Things are always in flux. I think the unique thing for the Cavs is even if Donovan Mitchell decides in free agency, like, you know what, I'm going to leave, they're not one of those teams that they have enough talent left that they can kind of do a soft rebuild in a sense where I don't feel like it's like a blow up the whole thing and watch it burn because Donovan Mitchell left town and we have no picks left kind of situation. So we're kind of just playing with the cards we have. I don't think it's necessarily like LeBron leaving where everything's crashing and burning and we just have to hope that this team can muster an 8th seed, because as long as Darius and Evan are there, I feel like that's a good cornerstone to like upstart any revival of the franchise that will needed to be taking place.
And LeBron is coming back, so you know.
I mean, well, yes, but we're saving that for down the road. They're down the road, and Bronny's gonna commit.
Well, I mean, that's where the Mobley ties. I mean, you got Isaiah, you got Evan, you got Mr. Mobley, there on the coaching staff. I mean, there's, USC's basically like Cavs undergrad. That's really what it is.
It's like how the Eagles only draft Georgia Bulldogs. We only draft USC grads.
Right.
Kevin Porter Jr.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say we draft USC grads, but yeah, just USC.
Well, yeah, sorry, I just hope they aspire for more.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, anyways, but yeah, I mean, as long as you have Garland and Mobley, I think that you're not far off, especially if they develop like we expect them to. It's just that it would be a major step back if this Mitchell thing doesn't pan out, because we see how good of a player he is. He had the second best season, the best season of any Cavalier not named LeBron James ever in franchise history. So it's like, this is a guy you'd like to keep around if possible, but we'll just see what happens.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to Kobe Altman just trusting his decision making and his whatever vision he has for this team. You made the choice to trade for Donovan Mitchell, and I feel like if right now you press the panic button and traded him this summer, that's kind of an indictment of like, what the hell were you doing in the first place, unloading the war chest to get him if it was only going to last one season and then you trade him. And I also think it comes down to trusting Donovan Mitchell. Again, I don't know him personally. I don't know what type of plans he has, but if you're Kobe, you have to trust that if Mitchell isn't going to commit, he's going to express that concern with you, or whatever problem he has with the team that's holding him back from staying in Cleveland. He's going to express that to you. And if you aren't able to fulfill whatever request he has, then you can work out a trade, or maybe he does leave in free agency, which would be the worst case scenario. But as Corey mentioned, you're still in a better spot than most teams are when they lose a star player, the caliber of Donovan Mitchell. You have Garland, you have Mobley. I think that's why if you do get the sense that he's going to leave, a trade would be so beneficial to this team, because you're not just going to look for like 100 draft picks. You could try to get someone back in return. And then you have Garland and Mobley as your centerpiece still. So I don't think when we talk about, are we concerned about Donovan Mitchell committing? I think, yes, you should have some questions if he's going to commit. But in terms of the franchise long-term, I wouldn't be too concerned yet, because I think even if you lose Donovan Mitchell for nothing, which would be the worst case scenario, you're still not in that bad of a position. Again, this isn't like LeBron leaving in 2010 where you're just left with nothing. It's not even 2018 where you're left with, young Bull coming in and he's your cornerstone. Like, they have two good pieces in place. I would consider Garland and Mobley the two untouchable members of the team, just from a skill standpoint, and the fact that you have Garland locked up, you'll probably have Mobley locked up for the foreseeable future. So I don't think the future's too dark, even if you do lose Mitchell.
I look at this as like a 2019 Sixers situation, but more long term, where like if you were the Sixers, you felt good because you had Simmons and Embiid, and you pushed a lot of your chips in to get, Jimmy Butler, and then you had really your best team then in 2019 when everyone was still really young, and then you're just one bounce away from going to the conference finals. And then that doesn't work. Jimmy leaves. It's not, the Sixers are still a really good team, but if the Butler thing worked out, we're looking at a team that may have gone to 2 or 3 finals, in that time period. So it's just like, these are, when you push your chips in as early as Kobe and the Cavs did, it really speeds up the timeline. And when you speed up the timeline, it's like things can fall apart quicker than they would have if you just would have let Lowry stay here and kept all the draft picks. And I think it was a great move still. I will defend the move, but it's just, like Kobe put this team in this position, and it's going to be up to him to make it all work out.
That's a great way of putting it. And the last thing that I want to say on the Donovan Mitchell thing is I would be significantly more concerned if the entire first round series was like game 1 where he has 38 points and the rest of the Cavs drop the ball and we lose. Like, I do think the fact that he also underperformed is a reason for optimism in a weird way. Because again, like if he had just completely carried the team and they went nowhere, I could 100% see him being like, all right, I'm out of here. These guys aren't ready for the moment. They might never be ready for the moment. And so in many ways this upcoming season, it's going to be tense because the Cavs have to perform. Kobe has to perform. The rest of the young core has to show up. They have to prove to Donovan Mitchell that this is a place where he can win.
I feel like the counter to that, though, could be that Mitchell would feel disappointed that he's on a roster that can't carry him when he's having off nights, because I feel like the regular season, Donovan Mitchell pretty much carried the Cavaliers on his back to the season that they had. Not saying like Darius didn't have a good season or Mobley obviously didn't have a good season, because they did respectively. But at the same time, it's just like, you see time and time again that the great playoff teams are able to survive when their best players are having off nights. I mean, the Celtics, before they decided to just completely collapse against the Miami Heat, when Tatum was having off nights, you saw great performances from like Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, able to keep the team afloat. And those mean a lot, I think, the players, to show why they don't necessarily, because it's a lot on a 7-game series. Your best player hopefully has a really good game 4 out of the 7 times. But I feel like more likely than not, they mostly have like 2 or 3 notable games. And then you always hear about the bench heroes or the role players that do something impactful. And I mean, this is just, it's a small sample size, but that Cavalier roster just provided no hope through a 5-game series against the Knicks. I mean, Darius had a great game, and then you could say he had 4 mediocre to below average games. And the bench was a no-show for pretty much the whole season. We didn't really go into the playoffs expecting them to show up, and they didn't show up. And now you're looking at teams like Miami, Denver, Boston, and the Lakers, and their bench players have all shown in at least one of the games. And you couldn't think of one time where any of the bench players really looked like that. So you would hope Kobe would alter the roster just so Donovan feels more supported. So when he has bad games in the next postseason, potentially, that he had in this past one, that there's at least a reason for him to have some hope.
Yeah. The biggest concern that I see is that the Cavs have 3 to 5 guys that you want on the floor during a playoff situation at all times. Like I'm always comfortable with Garland, Mobley, and, Mitchell out there, like regardless of how they're playing. But it's like Allen can sometimes kind of get played off the floor. Karis LeVert's somebody who can be hit and miss. And then it's like outside of that, it's like I don't want to see Dean Wade, Ricky Rubio. Sorry, Jetty, but I don't want to see, I don't want to see you
Sam
out there.
Merrill?
I mean, the problem that I see, like when you look at, like you mentioned the Lakers, and it's like, well, the thing that the Lakers have is they have, like, even though LeBron James is ancient, LeBron James is still, he can do so many things. Like, the Lakers were at their best when LeBron was attacking the basket and also guarding Jokic in that series. And it's like, the Cavs, they have a bunch. Their best players are kind of specialists. Darius Garland, he can do some things, but he can't do them all. Same with Mitchell. Same with definitely the same with Mobley and Allen. And it's just like they don't really have any complete basketball players. Really, like who's the most complete, well-rounded basketball player on the team?
Probably.
Harris?
I was gonna say Donovan. I don't know.
Donovan, but
it's like
I get what you're saying though.
He's also
he's a limited playmaker. Too. He's a limited defender. Like
and you need basketball players, and it's like
they have Dylan Windler who will be back next year, so that's a guy that could fill that role.
Right, but that's where I see like everything coming short, and that's why I think this is a good time to get into the Jarrett Allen portion. But I think this is why the Jarrett Allen concerns are there, because it's not that you'd be stupid to argue that Jarrett Allen's not good. Jarrett Allen's very good. He's a very good center. Like if you're looking for a traditional center, you're not going to get very many guys who are better than Jarrett Allen. Great roller, great lob finisher, provides tons of vertical spacing, good screener, great drop defender. He does everything you want a traditional center to do, but it's like when you look at all the teams around, you look at the best teams, like you look at the Nuggets, it's really Jokic, Murray, and then a ton of guys that fit around them. When you look at, the Heat, it's Jimmy Butler and a ton of guys that fit around them. The Celtics, it's still Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and a ton of guys that fit around those pieces. Whereas like the Cavs, we have 4 guys and they're all good. Maybe none of them are great besides Donovan Mitchell, and these 4 don't really fit extremely well together. And I think that's where you see some of the Celtics concerns, where it's like they don't, Brown and Tatum, they're very good, even though Tony doesn't think so. But they don't really fit.
Astray.
They they make each other better, and like that's where it's like, is this group of 4, they were amazing in the regular season, but is it the best way to spend your limited resources that you have on guys that maybe the best version of this Cavs team doesn't include Allen out there? Maybe it includes Mobley at the center, and if that's the case, then it's like you're using up a lot of your salary cap and your assets on a guy who doesn't fit all series. It's like, yeah, I could see him fitting against, you play the Sixers or you play the Bucks in a playoff series. It's like, yes, give me Jarrett Allen, because you need size inside. You need guys you can throw at Embiid and Giannis. If you're playing the Celtics, you don't really feel that way. If you're playing the Heat, is your best 5-man lineup including all 4 of those guys? And it's like, if it doesn't, that's where it's fair to question, like, hey, this group needs X, Y, and Z, and Jarrett Allen doesn't provide that and isn't versatile enough to be included in the best 5 in every matchup if Evan Mobley progresses as we all think that he will.
Yeah, I agree with all those concerns. I think, again, this is where, for me, I kind of look at the Cavs roster and I think like, well, this is where you need the glue guys that I was talking about. This is where you need to retool the supporting cast so that you can stagger Mobley and Allen a little more. You can, if we're going to talk about complete basketball players, like almost all of this discussion is pointless if Mobley doesn't become some sort of complete basketball player on both ends. Like, do the Cavs ever compete for a title if Mobley doesn't make that leap? Probably not. So, and if you're concerned about Mobley making that leap, completely understandable, but I do think that's kind of the expectation you have to have if you're trying to build a title team. I do think the fit with Mobley and Allen is a little less comfortable than you would want it to be. This is one area where it would have been really nice to see what the playoffs last year would have looked like when you had Lauri Markkanen, because he was a great glue guy next to those 3. And so it's like, does Allen look better next to Mobley last year if they have that spacing? I don't know. That's what I personally want to see this summer. It's easier said than done, but add some spacing, add some better supporting guys around them, and let's see if Allen makes more sense next to this lineup. You said a bunch of great things about Allen, so I won't pretend that you slandered him, but I will just make the point that he is, an elite defensive anchor. He's a versatile defender. He can switch onto the perimeter. borderline all-star when he's at his best. I feel like a lot of Cavs fans, not including you, are selling very low on Allen just because of a rough playoff series, where the reality is he's the fourth best guy on this Cavs team, maybe even the fifth, depending on how Karras is playing. And like, you look at any team in the playoffs, their fourth and fifth guys, they're going to have rough series. They're going to have series where they're matched up against someone who gets the better of them. They're going to have bad games. It happens. It's not an excuse for Allen, but it's just something that I think if you're someone who only watches the Cavs, maybe you have a warped perception of how role players tend to play. Because like, if you watch the Heat, you're like, wow, the Heat have like 7 undrafted guys who just show up every single game. That's crazy. The Cavs had no one show up. But I do think that we've gotten a little low on Allen, just the general fan base. No one in this specific pod. I think, Jackson, I thought you were going to slander Allen a little more than you did, but I agree with everything you said, honestly. I do think there's concerns. I'll flip this over to Corey. How are you feeling about Allen's fit long-term with this Cavs team?
I feel less good about it than I did pre-playoff series. I think it's very easy as a fan to get absorbed into regular season basketball. You watch it for 82 games and you're like, oh, this defense looks pretty good. I don't see how it could possibly fail. Then you get into playoff basketball and you just completely remember how it's so much more strategic than regular season. Regular season at times kind of feels like glorified pickup where you're just kind of going through the motions until like the last quarter. I feel like strategic decisions are not made whatsoever. And it became abundantly clear that Thibodeau was just salivating at the Mobley Allen minutes, just knew completely how to get him out of spacing to not allow them to get rebounds. I mean, and if Jarrett Allen has a bad game defensively, offensively, he can only do so much pick and roll and just be at the dunker spot to be valuable for this Cavs team. Most big men do at points in playoff games get ganked for smaller lineups, try to stretch the floor more. And unfortunately for Jarrett Allen, like, he's a great defender. Offensively, he's as good with as limited as he is. Like, he maximizes what he's good at, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a floor raiser offensively. I'd be lying if I said I haven't like tried to look at ways in which we could swap Jarrett Allen for a connective tissue type wing. But the wing, I don't know if it's just that the league is wing hungry per se, but I don't even think with the way that the market is towards wings that Jarrett Allen, even though he is an all-star level center, could be traded for a wing that would move the needle a ton, just because teams covet that position in the first place and aren't going to be willing to swap one of the harder positions to get for a center, which you could pick up a free agent center in the upcoming summer that could probably do 70% of what Jarrett Allen does. And what makes Jarrett Allen such a great player is the 30% else that he provides at that position. I think the Cavs' best timeline probably doesn't include Jarrett Allen in it, which kind of stinks to say, because obviously, like, you grow to love these teams, and Jarrett Allen was arguably like one of the first pieces to fall into place where the team kind of felt like they were making that step forward. They weren't just in purgatory of lottery teams. But I agree with Jackson that the Cavs 4 kind of feels like they operate in pairs. It feels like offensively Garland and Mitchell pair well, and defensively Allen and Mobley pair well, but you couldn't say that all 4 of them cohesively work on either side of the floor. Both duos are a hindrance to the other two when they're on the floor. The bigs kind of chug the offense down, and the defense kind of has to work around the 2 small guards. So making it a 3-person problem versus a 4-person problem would probably solve a lot of the issues in terms of fits.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And I was kind of trying to find the best way to say this, but one of the things that the playoffs really showed me is that teams that go big, you know, their problems. It's like, hey, there's not going to be a lot of spacing out there. We're going to have to do a lot of dirty work. And we're going to have to make this a really physical game if we want to win. And teams that go small are like, hey, we got to push the pace. We got to score in transition. We got to hit outside shots, you know, to try to avoid those half-court situations where teams are, you know, grabbing the smaller guards and making it really difficult for them to move off ball. And like the Cavs kind of split the baby when it comes to how they built this team with we're gonna make it big in the front court and small in the back court and just kind of hope that they balance each other out. And we really saw against the Knicks, they had all the problems that a small team had offensively, where it's like, sorry, they had all the problems that a big team had offensively, where there was no spacing. They were just packing the paint. They were saying, hey, we're just going to, on these rolls, we're just going to, trap and just make the roller make a play in the short roll. And then on defense, it was like, hey, we're going to exploit your smaller guards. We're going to put them in screens. We're going to put them in actions. And then we're going to, really just get to our spots really well before your bigs can even do anything. And that's where all the problems really started. Is the Cavs don't have like a style of play that they can go to. And it just feels like you almost just need to pick a direction. Like, are we going to be this big physical team? Because they're not a big physical team, because they have two guys who are big, and then, they're small at the three, whether that's Okoro or, LeVert, and they have a really small backcourt. Or you're going to be a team that tries to run and space and use what you have in Garland and Mitchell. And really, neither one of them are set up to succeed offensively. So that's where it's like, if you remove Allen, and saying we need to trade out is a lot easier than actually doing it and getting pieces that fit, because as Corey was saying, it's like, it's hard to get wings. And that's, Kobe built this team on market inefficiencies. He got Lauri Markkanen when nobody else believed in him. He swooped in to steal Jarrett Allen when people were like, oh, he's just a traditional big. What can you do with a traditional big? And that's all their successes came without the things that teams covet most. And now they're in a position where, hey, we're good, but we don't have any of the things that every other one of these teams have.
I like that you brought up the split between the size in the front court and the back court, because I do think that is one of the question marks that would come if you trade Allen. Is like, well, you'd have to be pretty confident that Mobley can play center. But not only that, who's playing power forward in that scenario? The Cavs don't really have many guys who can play that position. And so are you trading Allen for a wing that can also play the four? It's just, there's a lot of problems that emerge if you trade Allen. Not to put either of you on the spot, because I do think you can point out the flaw without necessarily having a solution. But are there any specific trade targets out there that you would want for Allen? Or like, how do you guys feel about that? Is anyone coming to mind?
Well, I think it's more interesting that if we did this move this season, you'd probably move Mobley to center. But with the way that Mobley is kind of limited offensively, you could go for a smaller four that could stretch the floor per se. Like, that becomes more of a need. But if Mobley's able to stretch the floor, you could go for a more traditional four. I think it kind of really Mobley kind of would determine what that roster makeup is and what the Cavs believe he could become. Like, ideally, the Cavs could run like a roster kind of similar to what the Nuggets were doing if Mobley could stretch the floor a little more and bring up the ball. But similar, it's like outlandish to say, like, just be like Jokic and all your problems are solved. It's just like, but like, if you had like Aaron Gordon level power forward out there that can kind of be that flyer, but also stretch the floor if dire needs were made, because Mobley is also able to knock down and be able to play off ball. I mean, watching the Lakers Nuggets game and seeing how when Jokic was in foul trouble, that Gordon was able to play some kind of small ball five, like not drown them. I couldn't think of one situation where Dean Wade would be coming into the game for the Cavs and be able to run small ball five and wouldn't look like an absolute outlier on the floor. So I know I didn't really answer your question at all, but I feel like you kind of just like could go if Mobley's development goes the way that the Cavs kind of are hoping, you can kind of find archetypes that could fit the lineup. It adds a lot of flexibility to what you could build.
One thing I think should be brought up is I feel like it's lazy to do the AD Mobley comparisons, just because I think they're very different players and very different personalities, even if they're both very they don't get excited very easily. They have the same demeanor. But I really like what the Lakers did when they won the bubble title, where they were they had AD at the 4, but you were getting minutes from Howard and McGee, who were at that time, I believe they were both minimum players at the time. It's hard to convince guys like that to come to Cleveland, but just having a center that's capable of playing, regular season basketball, because I don't have concerns about this team in the regular season. I think, for 82 games, I really would rather have, Mobley at the 4 and just kind of like, hey, we're closing games. Let's put Mobley in and, pick whoever else. But, that's a lot of moves to say we got to move Jarrett Allen and then we got to bring in like literally 2 other starters and then another bench player too. So it's tough to envision when none of this has happened, but that's kind of what I think the best version of this team is.
I think it's also fair to point out that losing Allen loses the ability for Mobley of what makes him special with that ability to roam. I feel like, and that's because of Allen's gifted ability to guard the basket. It's not like you can pick like one of those Dwight Howard, JaVale McGee types and tell him just like, oh, do what Jarrett Allen did, but for like pennies on the dollar, pretty much. It's just so Mobley can kind of run around and do what he wants. I feel like you're kind of sacrifice the defensive identity by losing Jarrett Allen a decent amount. So it'd be interesting to kind of see. I know we're not doing a JB discussion, but I don't think JB will be the coach that would make that decision. Honestly, if that was the case, if you lose Jarrett Allen, the defensive identity is going to struggle, and that's JB's bread and butter. So I feel like they'd kind of use that as the reason to why they'd probably give him the axe. But you can't also count out how important Jarrett Allen is to that defense.
One thing I will say is if we just did the basic vanilla approach of like, hey, this team needs a shooter, and they go out and they get like a legitimate shooter, not like Jetty can shoot, but he's actually like basically average. Like if they got like a real shooter who really fit well, like Golden State, they won the title last year with having really 2 shooters out there. But what's the difference? Obviously, Steph Curry's a little better than anybody the Cavs have. But they also actually know how to move off ball. Their 2 best players, their 2 best shooters are constantly moving. It's not like they weren't just constantly like, hey, we're doing, Looney high screen and, Curry high screen and rolls with Looney or Green and just hoping that somehow we get a drive and kick the Clay. So it's like, if you really are committed to this core 4 because of those defensive things that you pointed out, then you have to make it work on offense, and you really have to get creative, and you have to get buy-in from Garland and Mitchell and say, hey, you guys for this to work, you got to play a style that you've never played before. You can't just pound the ball, either one of you. We can't just do endless high screen and rolls. You got to be moving off ball consistently, so it's like, Evan Mobley would have to become a better screener for these off ball actions to work. So it's like, there are things that the Cavs can do to mitigate it that they currently aren't doing. So I don't want to say that like, yeah, Allen and Mobley can't work. It's just like, if we keep going down the path that they're currently going down, something needs to change, or they're just going to keep running into this wall, whether it's the first round or the second round.
Yeah, and I love the point that you made up, kind of about just the style that they play, because I do think in the playoffs, at times when they would sit Mobley or Allen and kind of go small, the Cavs didn't get any of the stuff that you normally would get when you do go small. Like, they weren't playing faster. They didn't get any additional spacing by going small. Like, Jetty and Dean Wade was on the floor for like 2 minutes. He didn't provide any spacing. Lamar Stevens isn't providing spacing. And so I do think, if you do pick a style, you'll have to get guys that actually fit that style. You'll have to get Mobley to actually set screens. Garland and Mitchell will have to play more off ball. So I think there's other issues there that almost don't even really involve Allen, like other things that need to be fixed. But kind of to wrap everything together that you guys are saying, because I agree with all of the concerns that you guys have with Allen. I'm on the same page as you. And I think we'll agree on this too. I think the issue is that I don't know if there is a trade out there that solves all of this. Like, I would have to see it, and I just haven't seen it yet. Like, if you're trading Jarrett Allen for Tim Hardaway Jr. and the 10th pick in the draft, like, is that just giving you more problems that you have to solve? probably. So like, I don't know if there's a deal out there that fixes those issues, then I'm on board with it. And I think you guys are too. But for me, until I see that, I feel like trading Allen isn't even necessarily trading one problem for another. It's almost like taking something that is proven to work in the regular season and trading it for like a mystery box or something that we don't know if this would work. Like if they change styles, would that be better? Maybe it could, but would they be able to do it? I don't know. And so that's where I'm at. Really, even with the JB thing too, is like I think we have to take a step back and just remember that this was their first trip to the playoffs together. I think even just from like a morale standpoint, if Kobe had smashed the panic button, fired JB, traded Allen, like done all this crazy stuff, like if you're Garland and Mobley, you're sitting there like, whoa, like one trip to the playoffs didn't go as planned and they just blew the whole thing up. Like if you're trying to keep people long term, if you're trying to attract new players to come to Cleveland, like I think that just sends a bad signal. So I'm in the boat of just being a little more patient. And I think we all agree there, unless there's an actual deal that is an upgrade, I think you just remain patient for now. The JB thing is a little different because I think there are potentially upgrades available right now, but that's another topic for another day. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Corey and Jackson, for taking the time. Please leave a rating, drop a like, subscribe, see the rest of our off-season episodes moving forward. And as always, go Cavs.
I agree. Go Cavs.